You are listening to the War on the Rocks podcast on strategy, defense, and foreign affairs. My name is Ryan Evans. I'm the founder of War on the Rocks. In this episode, I was joined by Alex Miller, the Chief Technology Officer of the U.S. Army. We discussed how he wants to see industry working with the Army, counter drone solutions, and so much more. And thanks so much to our friends at Helsing for hosting the event at which this live episode was recorded. Enjoy the show. Alex, how does one become the CTO of the Army?
Oh,
how does that work?
You said no hard questions. I don't know how I got here. I know what happened. So General George actually found me at the National Training Center because I owned the Intel architecture for what we had this experiment called Project Convergence. And I was the sole ISR task force rep that was out there, and I was willing to get dirty, and I was willing to go out into the field, and I was willing to just get my hands in everything. And I had an opportunity. I was out there for a couple weeks. I came back to the Pentagon for one day. General Potter, who was my boss, Laura Potter, she said, hey, go brief the Vice, General George at the time. I had about 20 minutes. He goes, cool, send me an email directly, which petrified me because I was like, this is definitely how I get fired. On your observations, and he asked for something like direct, which was tell me what's not working, which scared me. The next day, I got a note from his XO that said, hey, the boss is going out to NTC next week. You're going to be attached to him the whole time. The night after he got out there, I walked him through everything. He goes, hey, you're going to come and work for me. So he has given me a tremendous amount of opportunity. Originally, it was just fixing the network. He said, do what you do best. Do it for the entire Army. And what I am most thankful for is with Secretary Driscoll coming on board, he has said, you're the dude. Make sure you do the right thing. Use your rank for good. Go forth and conquer.
So it turns out if you could moderately sized problems, they just give you even harder problems to solve. And that's how you ended up here today.
Roof shots become moon shots.
So I know one of the things you're really focused on these days is counter UAS, counter drone. Let's start here. To what extent can we look to Ukraine for those lessons? To what extent do we need to look elsewhere?
We are not the Ukrainians and we are not the Soviets, so we don't fight the same way they do. The thing that I'm most worried about is actually learning the wrong lessons. So I'll take that statement and I'll put it in a shoebox and we'll come back to it later. Who here has gotten blown up by an IED or an S-Vest or anything else? Okay, IEDs fly now, and they fly at 100 miles an hour. That is my starting point for what counter UAS looks and feels like today. So when we think about the lessons that we're learning, that's the number one takeaway. They don't just attack buildings. They're not stationary on the road. They'll actually try to find you and kill you wherever you are. And if you think differently, you're losing. So as we think about what counter UAS means, it's being able to protect yourself on the move. It's being able to, we have, the rule of three, right? So we sense, we decide, and we act. But it's being able to do that fast enough, which really means automation, so that before you even know that it's coming at you, some countermeasure has kicked off to stop it. And that could be a kinetic countermeasure. That could be a non-kinetic countermeasure. That could just be a decision that it's actually not targeting you. Let your hire go after it. Let your sister brother battalion or formation go after it. But I will tell you, the Ukrainians shoot down like 50% of their own things because the hard problem is actually managing all of that airspace when you have thousands of things in the air. So thinking about counter UAS is really, hey, the threat flies really fast. It can come from anywhere. You have to have really good tools, techniques, and procedures in place to do it. And the same way that who went through CRC at Atterbury or at Bliss? Anybody for the Army? Okay. So one of the things they taught you before you went into the GWAT was, down, out, up, because you wanted to make sure you didn't step on a mine or an IED. Well, now it's, hey, how do you make sure that you're sector scanning, you're looking up, and you always know what's around you in the air? I'm really passionate about this.
Yeah,
it scares the shit out of me.
Well, so what are the solutions that you have?
We've seen a couple. Let me talk organization first, because I'm really proud of the Army. We had this thing called the Joint Counter Small UAS Office, and it was intended, being very deliberate with my words, it was intended to solve this problem, but it wasn't set up to solve the problem. It wasn't set up to actually go out and hunt the problem. It wasn't go out to spend money to solve the problem. It wasn't set up with people who really understood what an infantryman's task is versus an air defender's task. So after 5 years, we said, okay, no more. This is not the right solution. And we had an opportunity to brief the Sec War directly, like General George gave me the opportunity to do that. They said, there was an organization once that got really, really good at countering asymmetric threats, and it was called JIATO. How about we set that up again? And how about we do it for counter-UAS? So thus, JIATA 401, Joint Interagency Task Force 401. Anybody guess that why 401?
No guesses from the audience,
No
from
guesses.
listener at home.
Okay. So we have unrestricted freedom of maneuver at 400 feet and below. 401 is where it becomes an interagency problem. So we named it Joint Interagency Task Force 401. And the Army is still the executive agency. We actually picked Brigadier General Matt Ross to run that for the Department of War. He answers to the Sec War and the DepSec War. The Army is the executive agent. So that's organization. So they have acquisition authority. They have R&D money. They have the ability to go out and kill bad requirements. They have the ability to generate new requirements. They have the ability to actually go to the services and say, the things you're doing aren't working. We need to change it. Organization. Okay, so for stuff, if you shoot a drone flying at you with 5.56 or 7.62, guess what happens? Nothing. So we are seeing all of the different ways that nothing works. We stood up an exercise with the UK called Flytrap, the Army did. And the whole point was, what is a platoon or a squad, a fire team, an infantryman, what do they need to protect themselves? We're finding some really good lessons. EW works right up until the moment it doesn't. You got about 21 days. 21 days between the time that you implement a new EW effect and the time that it's countered. 30 mic works really well. 30 mic with a prox fuse works really, really well. The thing that is killing most of the Shahed type drones in Iraq, and my current XO was the BDOC commander at Al Assad, like he had experience killing these things, are really expensive. So we're seeing all of these asymmetric ways to kill very cheap drones that are very expensive. And what my job is for the Army and what Matt's job is for the Joint Force is figure out what's the really cheap way to kill a really cheap thing in mass. We are testing all kinds of things. We're going to test them. We're testing some things in Europe with Flytrap, particularly in Germany, Poland, and Lithuania, and other places. But we're going to take a lot of that down to the southern border because it's not just about conflict zones. We're seeing thousands, tens of thousands of south to north incursions by the cartels, by traffickers, frankly, just by curious observers into the United States on the southern border. So we're actually going to move a lot of that stuff down there too. And then we get into the really cool stuff like lasers and high power microwave, which we're trying.
I've had quite a few soldiers, both senior NCOs and officers, come up to me. And I know the mission of the southern border, there's a lot of political reasons it's not popular, but there are tons of interesting drone things going on down there that we're learning from. But to what extent can you speak to that in a little more detail?
You know, personal story. I graduated high school outside of Fort Huachuca, Arizona. So I lived down there on the border, and right, wrong, or indifferent, the MPs on Huachuca had to round up folks that were coming. And the sad part is a lot of them were lied to, right? They were trafficked, they were smuggled in, they were told that they were in Phoenix and they could just start going north and they were fine. Not going to comment on any of that. We also had to deal with cartels moving drugs across the southern border. And the thing that scared all the commanders on post was they were afraid our intel soldiers who were training out there would get on a blink on live firefight because they would think that the traffickers and the smugglers and the cartels were up for. It's still happening. What we are seeing is lots and lots of drones moving small amounts of drugs, but also monitoring. So we've had 4th Infantry Division was down on the border, 2nd Brigade, 4th Infantry was down on the border, 10th Mountain Division was the headquarters down there, 101st just swapped out with them. We're going to put another brigade combat team down there. What they are seeing is a policy problem and a technical problem. So they are now seeing drones of unknown origin, they're not ours, sitting there looking at them. So loitering and watching, to me, that's a threat because that's recce, that's ISR. That is someone watching me And I don't care who they are at that point. They're trying to figure out what I'm doing and what I'm capable of. So that's one. Up until recently, we have not had the authority to do anything about it. So there's lots of laws in the books. There's one 10 USC 130I and 6 USC 124N. That's the Department of Wars and the Department of Homeland Security's authorities to do this respectively. You can't shoot something down unless it is a threat. Well, whose job is it to determine threat? It's a commander's job. The challenge is there's a lot of people who get to say no, like the Federal Aviation Administration. And I get it. I get it. I don't want to jam a commercial airliner. I get it. We don't want to shoot something that dazzles the S-band radar on the nose of a commercial airliner. But what it's done is it's created this really perverse incentive that's actually challenged our soldiers' abilities to make those decisions.
That was a good diversion, an interesting diversion, something I've been curious to learn about more myself. Back to counter UAS, what do you want to see from industry in terms of how they work together on this problem? Because you hear a lot about great companies, I won't name specific ones, but that bring this capability to the table, whether it's in sensing, this when it comes to jamming and EW. What do you want to see from industry in terms of how they try to work with the Army on this problem set?
Flexibility is the number one, and I'll give you an example. If you make a sensor, I need you to be flexible in updating it and taking feedback. You will find no harsher critic than someone who has been blown up, because they know what the threat really looks like. I promise you, your engineers will be welcomed with open arms into our formations. If only you will send them and go, what do you need? So flexibility. Second, if we tell you something doesn't work, don't argue with us. Like if it really does and we're wrong, show us that it works, but understand that the edge condition that we might have assessed it under or tried it under was different than what you thought we were going to do. So work with us there. Again, it goes back to being flexible. And three, be open with and this is entirely technical. Be open with how your thing talks with other things. For example, I am dealing actively with a lot of legacy systems that the only way to access them are binary feeds or SOAP XML interfaces. Because when they were built, that was the thing. I know that most of the companies that are successful have really good APIs because that's just a pragmatic way to do everything. Please make sure that all your interfaces are available and documented, because there will come a time when someone like me calls and says, I have a really interesting problem, like I'm seeing radar tracks after we kill something that don't know how to differentiate debris from another threat. And I need you to update your radar so that we don't waste 4 to 5 extra missiles on debris. Not a hypothetical scenario. If your answer is, hey, we'll get at that in a couple of epochs and it's going to take 18 months, I'm going to do my best to get you out of the solution.
I know that the Army learned a lot of lessons on next generation command and control in terms of how industry works with other parts of industry on a common problem. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Sure. Next gen command and control is not a buzzword. So, and I'm happy to talk about it because I'm very excited with what we're doing. So if you haven't dug into it, what we did is we asked industry to team, and I don't mean lead systems integrator. I mean actually team in a way that I expect the team lead to be a coach and a mentor and actually do what we ask them to do. But the government maintains the flexibility to engage with all the players on the team. But it really creates this cool condition where I don't have to expect every member of that team nor the lead to be good at everything, because very few companies are good at everything. I would say almost no company is good at everything. But the way the government used to contract, and still does in a lot of cases, expects whoever we're given $1 to be perfect at everything, and that's not real. So Next Gen C2, what we said is, it's an in-tier architecture. It's like nothing new for what we all grew up with. But we said, hey, the commodity infrastructure provider and the company providing the workflow for fires, probably different skill sets. What if we organized such that we could optimize those skill sets? So the first team we did a couple of experiments with, we used some flexible contracting. We said, hey, let's get somebody that's really, really good at a data platform. Let's get somebody that's really, really good at asset management. Let's get somebody who's really, really good at providing physical RF infrastructure and let them stack on top of each other. And they don't have to worry about the minutia. And we're not going to try to steal their intellectual property because if a company is willing to give us their IP, it's probably not that good and they probably can't monetize it. And I recognize that. But at the same time, it also puts the impetus on the government to maintain it, and that's silly. We're not good at it. So he said the only thing that the government should really, really own is probably the interface controls. And that ownership should probably really just be management of the ICDs, but not like, hey, I need you to use USMTF or VMF. It's, hey, make sure the documentation is provided, make sure it's updated, make sure we actually understand how to talk to your stuff. So if we want to do like really interesting third-party things from a government, like, I don't know, integrate a new ballistics kernel, it doesn't take me 9 months. So that's what's happening at 4th Infantry Division. So they're trying it out, and the ballistics kernel is near and dear to my heart because the ballistics kernel that the Army used, any field artillery folks in here other than Anthony? The field artillery ballistics kernel that we've been using for 40 years is 40 years old. And everyone kept telling me that it was impossible to update. Well, they said it would take 18 months, several $1 million. We said, cool, you have 6 months. They're going to shoot it roughly this date. And they did. But they did it because rather than trying to build this vertically integrated thing that nobody could talk to, they built it as a workflow. They built it as a service. We handed it to the first team out the door, Team Anderl. We said, you're going to shoot off of this. You don't get a choice. It's a third-party thing. You said you could integrate third-party things. And on September 16th, they shot cannons off of it. First time in 40 years we did that without AFATIDs.
We've talked in our private conversations about how important, and my team at War on the Rocks has heard me talk about this before, the importance of velocity in change management and transformation, Army Transformation Initiative. What have been some of the blockers to velocity, and what have been some of the things that have gone better than you expect in terms of realizing velocity in broader transformation?
Everything's been awesome because I'm part of a team. We had to kill a lot of stuff. I'm a storyteller. I'll tell you a story. The first thing we tried to kill was the Shadow. It was designed in 1996. It was fielded roughly 8 years later, and units had stopped taking it on their deployments because it wasn't providing any actual coverage to them. So the RQ-7. 2 years ago, actually roughly this time 2 years ago, we had a small session in the building, in the Pentagon, and we said, there's a lot of money in this, $77 million for the next year for contract logistics support for the Shadow. So CLS, $77 million. That paid for 53 human beings. $77 million for a system whose highest operational ready rate for the last 5 years was 50%. So we were paying a lot of money. We were using a lot of taxpayer dollars, and the vendor was not providing value. So he said, we're going to kill it. We're going to harvest that $77 million, which was really $500 million over the fight up. And we're going to use that for other drones of any time. Could be quadcopters, could be, replacements for Group 3 stuff. So the chief said, we're going to do this. The next day, we brought in a slightly larger team, said, hey, what are the mechanisms that we're going to do this? So this is November. And somebody goes, can't cancel that contract. Okay, why not? Well, the contract ends on December 31st. It would be really hard on people to lose their job on New Year's. This is a real conversation that happened, which I get. I'm empathetic. Like, I like hardworking Americans doing hard work. But that's not our job. That's not the government's job. That's certainly not the Army's job. So we asked the follow-on question. Okay, if we notify them now, what's the ramifications? They went, I can't. You're within the 60-day window, WARN Act. What if we extended it 30 days? What if we told them we're going to do a 30-day extension, but not a year-long extension? We're going to spend a couple $1 million to save like $50 or $60 million. Ooh, that's really tough. The next day, the vendor was calling and the representative was calling, going, ooh, you can't cancel that. It's a lot of people and money. We went, no, it's actually a lot of money and 53 people stationed in 5 places. I have a list. We went, no, you can't do that. So for $77 million, the entire Army was put on hold. So we said, okay, full send. We're going to just generate all of the stuff that we should kill, because if they're going to stop us on one thing, surely they'll stop us on everything. And that's where we put together things like the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle. We have almost 20,000 of them. If you've ever sat in a JLTV, that is not the vehicle you want in a light environment. Things like the FARA, the Fast Attack Helicopter, it wasn't the right thing for the fight we were hopefully never get into, but we might have to be in. So we said we're going to cancel that too. So over the last 2 years, your Army has been trying to stop spending money on stuff we know isn't right for a fight. And the process, and it's not, I'm not saying Congress is the problem. I'm saying the process, the capital P thing, the stuff that everyone has grown up with, revolted because we didn't ask their permission to do the right thing.
I think it's a great place to end it. Very powerful story. Thank you, Alex, for doing this. Thanks to Helsing for hosting the party. Let's give him a round of applause, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode of the War on the Rocks podcast. Do not forget to check out our membership program and also our other free podcast, Cogs of War, which focuses on defense, tech, and industry, brought to you by your friends here at War on the Rocks and our friends at Booz Allen. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and stay healthy.